Tucked away across the vast Atlantic Ocean, a once largely untouched North America teemed with life. Deer paraded through massive forests, bison herds thundered across great plains. Fish splashed through gem-blue streams. Turtles sunbathed on riverbanks. The continent's original inhabitants lived in balance with this environment. They were skilled agriculturalists, nomadic hunters, and food gatherers who maintained a diet of a rich variety of natural foods.
They did grow foods, and they had a gardening system, and they would also gather wild berries and foods that grew kind of in the wild, and they would hunt and fish. But it was not a system of excess, but foods were grown, and then a lot of things were dried so that they would have things to last throughout leaner months. And the same was true for fish and deer or buffalo.
Our people were hunting gatherers, they farmed, and so they were constantly moving, doing things for survival. You know, if they didn't do that, they weren't going to eat.
But the ocean couldn't shield this world forever. Christopher Columbus stepped foot on the soil of this new world in 1492, and he signaled doom for native societies. A steady influx of European settlers soon followed, transforming the lives of Native Americans forever. Before Columbus, the continent's indigenous people were healthy and lived off the land around them. Conquest changed that. Over the next several hundred years, entire nations lost touch with ancient wisdom in their traditional ways of eating. Many tribal nations were removed from their homeland.
We were relocated from Nebraska. We lived in Nebraska and then made the walk to Pawnee, Oklahoma. That's where we were. And my great-grandmother, May Goodbear, made that walk when she was 4 years old. And so, and we started out, I think, with about 10,000 of our Pawnee people on that walk. And when we arrived in Pawnee and they took the census, we were down, you know, like to 1,200. It was very sad, but we survived.
This relocation removed Native peoples from their usual food sources and from the active lifestyle that hunting and gathering demanded.
We were used to going out there and hunting for the buffalo and hunting for, you know, the meat to bring to the table for the people, and so we weren't used to being, you know, just on a reservation where you do not do that.
Fatty, salty government rations called commodities replaced healthy traditional foods.
Just thinking of going from pre-removal to post-removal foods. When you are uprooted from being able to farm and hunt and gather to a new place where you're given packages of things that are new and that you don't know what to do with them. I imagine that is a very drastic change.
Obviously, before European influence, the diet was completely different. And then the allocation of commodities and forced relocation and confinement to, you know, designated areas really had a negative impact on overall Native American health. So they went from eating, you know, all fresh fruits and vegetables or, you know, dried and preserved to making do with flour, sugar, lard, and maybe pork. Obviously, you had to do what you could to survive, but that wasn't the best.
Commodities that we were given, we were introduced with the commodities when we were relocated, and we were introduced to the flour, the sugar, the lard, the cheese, the canned meats, all the wrong kind, you know, of food that you should be eating, you know. So to me, that gave us a jump start on diabetes for our people. And I always felt like we had like 50 years, say, of McDonald's or some fast food.
If you look at kind of our health issues. Diabetes is running rampant in Native people, and so we got to have a change there.
The battle with obesity has become one of the most dire health concerns for Indian people. Over 30% of all American Indians and Alaskan Natives are obese. More than 15% of Native Americans suffer from type 2 diabetes, which is more than double the rate among Caucasians. American Indians and Alaskan Natives have a life expectancy that is about 4 years less than the general U.S. population.
Looking at statistics, we all see that in Native American communities, the prevalence of type 2 diabetes is much higher than it is within other populations. I think that a lot of it has to do with changes in time. Obviously, type 2 diabetes is a chronic disease, and so over time, as diets have changed and looking at pre-removal foods, when our ancestors would garden, they would hunt, they would fish, and so the food culture was very different than it was post-removal, relying more on the commodities.
That's all we had. I mean, we didn't even plant food there because we didn't even have the seeds to plant the food. And so we had to live on the commodities. If you wanted to live, if you wanted to eat, you served those commodities. And so in those commodities, the government, gave us the canned meat, they gave us the flour, they gave us the sugar, they gave us the lard, they gave us the canned meat. All the wrong things, that truly causes a lot of diabetes, a lot of heart disease. And heart disease and diabetes go hand in hand. They're just like twin sisters.
Google the health problems in Native Americans and how many of those are diet related. I mean, that's pretty much speaks for itself. Really, those diets have been radically altered since pretty much from contact. And so you're talking about people in a population that grew up eating this stuff for thousands of years, and suddenly in the course of 100 or 200 years are changing their diet radically. Yeah, what do you think? Of course they're going to have health problems because of the diet.
Many leaders in indigenous communities are now working to reverse these trends. A push for healthy, sustainable food is taking hold in American Indian communities.
For any culture, for any people to really take on the things that they want to see changed is really important, because I think that in anything that we want to see change, it has to come from within. And so with whatever you're struggling with, until you decide, like, this is a change I want to see, this is a change I want to make, it's not going to happen. It can't happen from external forces. And so I think that tribes really embodying that change, and as a community, as a whole people taking that on, again, it's internal. And so it's saying that we have this within us. This is our history, this is our culture. We want to bring this back to the forefront to sustain our people.
There's a whole different system and life way that kind of comes from a lot of this stuff. And I understand that we're not everybody's going to be able to go back and farm or whatever, but everybody really could grow corn in container pots out in your front yard. There's a really strong cultural reason for doing this, because again, food culture is sort of expressed in many ways through food. Prevention
is what is needed before you come to full terms of needing care for your diabetes and for your illness that you have. And to know what you put in your mouth, and to show the children by example. We need to be, that's how children learn, is by example. And we as Indian people, and as parents and as grandparents, need to be examples for our children.
A lot of tribes now have started initiatives around health, and specifically food. There are several tribes that have started doing community gardening projects, and a lot of the foods that they grow in the community gardens go back specifically to feeding elders. So with their meal service programs to elders, and then some are even doing them in their early childhood centers, and so then those foods are going back to the youth at a very early age, hopefully raising them up in the tradition of our ancestors. And then of course supporting our elders, who are the ones who have carried these traditions on to us. You know, I think that without them and their knowledge and their willingness to share that knowledge with the youth, we wouldn't have everything that we do now, and we wouldn't be able to have these initiatives without them being willing to give so much of themselves and their stories and their histories.
In our tradition back to our children. I mean, that this is traditional. I think it has a more of a meaning, and our ancestors has prayed for that. I mean, they have prayed for that all along, you know, that we keep this, our tradition. And look, and it kept the Indians, you know, healthy. I mean, you know, we survived so much. And so it definitely is. Besides just being a tradition passed on to our young, it's nourishing. It's a preventative of diabetes. It's just good for your health.
For many in Indian country, helping Native Americans make the shift to earlier and better ways of eating starts with raising the nutritional quality of the food aid to tribes.
A lot of tribes have set up actual stores, and so it looks like you're going shopping in a grocery store. And over time, the package, the food package has been enhanced greatly. Within the Chickasaw Nation, they do now offer fresh fruits and vegetables. They have for many years. They have ground beef. Sometimes they even have bison. They'll have turkey breasts, and so they do offer a much wider variety of food now that meets the USDA guidelines. Not everything is canned any longer. There are fresh options. Instead of canned beans, they have canned beans, but they also have dry beans. And in the summer months, they also will offer a lot of times vouchers for fresh produce from the farmers market, which does help support Native American farmers, which I think is a wonderful benefit of that. It's encouraging people to buy fresh produce, to buy local produce, and supporting local farmers. And so I know that it has been an initiative to try to get Native farmers to participate more in farmers markets. And so again, kind of creating that circle of growing the food, having Native Americans purchasing from Native American farmers to support each other.
Many Native American nations offer engaging cooking demonstrations to reintroduce home-cooked meals into American Indian diets. These classes arm tribal citizens with the techniques and inspiration to get back in the kitchen.
I think it helps give you new ideas. You know, sometimes we're scared to try something new. Like, I'm going to spend money on this, and what if I don't like it? What if I don't cook it right? And it's easy to kind of fall into things that you know. And so cooking classes give you an opportunity to try something new, to learn how to cook it, and just get new ideas.
Then I was a public health nurse to be their diabetic teacher. Just saw, you know, how it could be so devastating. Diabetes could be so devastating to the people. But my goodness, they don't eat right, you know. And so I'd make up all this diabetic food and bring it in, you know, and those other women there that were nurses and everything, don't tell them it's diabetic food, you know. And so we wouldn't, and they just loved it. Then afterwards, you know, we would share the recipes and everything. But just to teach them from the very get-go, you know, so they could help their young.
A marriage of indigenous wisdom and academic knowledge has fueled culturally based nutrition education programs. These restorative traditional teachings support the resilience of indigenous food traditions.
Coming back to that, what our ancestors knew and realized was important, I think we're coming back to some of that now. In the ways that we look at food and in teaching youth about what our foods are now, and hopefully teaching them that they can also be part of this system and that it's not just the grocery store or the restaurant, that it can also be your backyard or, you know, the community garden that's down the road. When we think about food, we have to think about it as fuel, but we also have to think about it as what other spiritual, emotional, communal needs is it fulfilling, and how can we make sure that it's fulfilling those needs in a healthful manner.
Education initiatives are also tackling misconceptions about ancestral food.
I think that making the distinction that when we talk about our ancestors, that traditionally they did not eat fried bread. Traditionally, they probably did not eat anything that was fried. But honoring that and respecting that that's a part of something that their family does, I think is important. But also making that distinction that what is contemporary traditional food and what is maybe pre-removal traditional food, and helping children to understand what are the differences in those things so that as they grow up, they can continue their family traditions. Family traditions are so important. But that they can also recognize what were the more communal traditions. And so what were the traditional foods that people ate for ceremony.
American Indian communities are reaching back to their roots to promote healthier eating habits. They are rediscovering the rich agricultural history of their people.
I sit on the board of trustees for the Pawnee Nation College, and so proud of what they're doing. They partnered with OSU. Now they're at the Pawnee Nation College with our agriculture department. We planted a garden. Just gives me chills to talk about this. No, we planted a garden, and the garden has all of the, the three sisters in there, and all the traditional foods that we used to have. We have our greenhouse that was in the boarding school, and it was the laundry room. And so we turned that into a greenhouse. So something, we made something just so wonderful out of something that was pretty devastating to our Pawnee people, being in the boarding school. And so now, we raise cilantro, we raise all of the good the things that you should be eating. And they're given to our elders. They're given to our elders, and they're given to anybody that wants them there at Pawnee.
As the world changes, the technology changes. I love that tribal nations are jumping on board with that and creating some of those same initiatives within their tribes. But it's also what is sustainable and what is feasible, what is doable, and how much can we reasonably logistically do to sustain our people, and then what is extra that we can use for commercial uses. And so I think that that's also something very important to consider with food sovereignty is the sustaining the people in the tribe, the sustaining the environment. What can the environment take? How much is this practice taking from the earth?
Family, they grow corn. I'm Muskogee Creek, Shawnee, and Seneca. And on my Shawnee side, my family still grows our heirloom corn. It's important because we utilize it in our ceremonies, and then it's the heirloom. It's it's healthier for our people. It was a part of our diet, and so nowadays when you go to the store, you get this genetically modified corn, and so it's not something that was in our diet, and so that's one of the big reasons why I want to revive it and bring it back.
The fact is, you just can't find this stuff. And it's part of the culture, right? In a lot of deep ways, in a lot of things. So, if we don't have our traditional varieties and we can't maintain them, then in a certain sense, and we're talking about food sovereignty, then how are we sovereign?
Food sovereignty is transforming the lives of Native Americans. A new wave of Native voices is rising up to heal the dietary health crisis in Indian country.
That's my whole goal in life is to help others and to teach them right, especially our people.
One of the things I think I always heard when you would come to like a Muskogee travel town, you would know you was there because you would already see the cornfields. There would be miles of cornfields before you actually got to the travel town. So that's probably one of the wishes I have for my tribe is that before you get to Omogi, you'll see our cornfields.
Native Americans, we are a very small percentage of overall U.S. population, and so I think that we want to continue our generations, and so I think that in order to do that and to be able to thrive as Native Americans and to continue our strengths, our culture, and our heritage, we can only do that if we're healthy. Our people are so resilient. And so being able to take that and then deciding as a tribe, this is what we can do to support that. And these are initiatives that we can start. These are the areas that we can take control of. And I think that that is so much more important, especially when we think about food sovereignty and tribal sovereignty, and that we are sovereign nations. And so we do need to be taking control of those things for ourselves and our